Strong winds. Most windstorms were in the spring or fall, but some of the summer gusts could be exceptional. It seemed to be a local condition. Cadomin is situated between Mount Leland at 8,341 feet and the Sleeping Beauty at 7,877 feet. South of Cadomin stands Mount Cheviot at 8,925 feet. The McLeod River starts off above Mountain Park and on the watershed this side of the Cardinal Divide. It flows northeastward on the east side of Mount Cheviot. The Whitehorse River, flowing on the west side of the Three Valleys, joins the McLeod River as it flows through the McLeod Pass into Cadomin at an altitude of 4,942 feet. Excessive precipitation and strong winds are outstanding climate features of this region. The force of the wind at times lifted boxcars right off the tracks. Many times coming home from school, we were forced to grab the telephone poles, hold on to fences, or even lay on the sidewalk so as not to be blown backwards. The clinkers and ashes from the powerhouse made for a very good roadbed, but when airborne, they were dynamite on the eyes and skin. In 1935, we had a bad windstorm. On the bottom end of town, a chicken house belonging to Harry McKenna was blown away. The sad part was that Alex Irons, the hired hand, was in it, and it cost him his life. Danny McKenna was telling me that they sent him back east for burial. He also told me that they had about 1,000 chickens and never found a single one. The coyotes, no doubt, found more than one. The ladies would wear ski pants to dances when the temperatures were plunging and take them off when they arrived. They also wore them when the wind was howling, or else the cinders would ravel their nylons and cut their legs. Raveled nylons mixed with blood looked awful. Many sheds and outhouses were anchored down with the cables or poles. Trucks were blown off the road and roofs were blown off houses. The two-story butcher shop had 2 BC firs against it to anchor it. When out in a storm, you had to watch for projectiles such as sheet iron, plywood, planks, and other things. I remember when Don and I got a brand new wagon and on a windy day went to the hardware store. We picked up the side of a plywood packing crate. I climbed into the front of the wagon to steer and Don got on one side using the plywood as a sail. Wow! We moved faster and faster until I could hardly steer. I yelled, "Let it go! Let it go!" He couldn't hear me on the other side of the plywood and all of a sudden he was gone. He passed me, taking about 8-foot steps. I yelled again, "Let it go!" He didn't. He crossed the sidewalk and into the side of Miss Baziski's house. Miss Baziski had come out to see what happened. Don was lying on the ground, and I thought he was going to die. He had the wind knocked out of him. Mr. Baziski asked me if I was trying to kill him. When Don had finally talked again, I asked him why he didn't let it go. He said, "Oh yeah, let's see you try to let it go when you're flying through the air." I guess he would have had a worse tumble if he'd released the plywood. After the war ended, the road to the outside world was completed. Many things changed. For example, responsibility for the school went from the Cadomin Coal Company to the school board. The school building contract was put out for bids. An outside contractor was successful. Being unfamiliar with the Cadomin breeze, the workers put up their framework, ignoring the warnings from the townfolk and miners on their way to work. When told of the wind, they smiled and listened politely. You guessed right, they were introduced to the Cadomin breeze. It totally leveled the structure and blew out most of the windows in the school bus. The next morning, they were out there looking at the destruction and shaking their heads as the miners passed on their way to work. The loss of roofs was a common occurrence. One episode was different, however. Bill Copeland, his wife Irene, and their new baby lived downtown close to the rink. They just built their home and were finishing it when they had another storm. It was in the wee hours of the morning when the wind lifted not only the roof from their heads, but also the walls and a section of the floor. For some strange reason, the section of the floor which had the stove on it and the bed on it that they were sleeping on was left. They were very fortunate to have left the baby with Irene's mother, Mrs. Beale. Wrapping sheets around themselves, they made their way to Bill's parents' place in the middle of the night. Talk about having guardian angels. The roof was blown off the top of a 6-room house belonging to Dr. Rocchio and was set down about 100 feet away. They didn't even wake up. On one occasion, the leg of a sawhorse was driven through a kitchen wall. The paint on homes and machinery really got a beating. One truck had all the paint and sandblasted off the windright side down to the metal. Phil Philbrook was driving a bus for Mr. Madsen of Mountain Park. He used to park it beside the garage in Cadomin. A windstorm blew up and sandblasted it with the dirt, sand, and stones off the baseball diamond, removing most of the paint down to the metal on one side and breaking a few windows. As a tidbit of trivia, Mr. Madsen also had 3 Packards joined together to form a 12-passenger bus with 6 doors on each side. It got high-centered on the railway crossing as you enter Cadomin, requiring a small tow truck to remove it. They took it back to the garage and raised the suspension. After that, it was in service for a number of years, and used it when there were not enough passengers for the big bus. As one enters Cadomin, there's now a sign, "Welcome to Cadomin, the Valley of the Wind."